This week on Case Studies with the BizDoc, it's Expensify, the company that makes software that makes expense reports so much easier. We have the full story from venture funding to growth to an IPO that's coming soon this week. Expensify. It's expense report software designed and built by a guy who just wanted to make expense reports that didn't suck because he hated doing expense reports. But that's not what the passion, and that's not really what the full trigger was. It's a very interesting story. I went to the source and I got the information, and this is how it goes. Once upon a time, this guy, David Barrett, was working with this guy, Travis Kalanick, at this company, Red Swoosh. And they were working on peer-to-peer software, and subsequently, they sold the company. Michael, who'd they sell to? Akamai? Akamai, I think it was Akamai, right? They sold the company to Akamai, and away they go. And Travis Kalanick went off to do Uber and other things. He's working on a kitchen project now. And David Barrett went and started Expensify. But it wasn't like a straight line just going to start it. There's an interesting story that goes with it, as told by Dave Barrett and by the people at Expensify. So apparently David Barrett is in San Francisco, and there's an area called the Tenderloin where there is just a tremendous amount of people that are suffering with addictions and are really in need or homeless. As he looked around there, he said, how could I maybe have a system or a credit card or some sort of financial mechanism so I could get help to these people and do it in a controlled way, so I'm getting help to people that are trying not to be users anymore, trying to get one foot in front of the other, but really just help these people that are in desperate need in the Tenderloin, which is this really troubled neighborhood in San Francisco. So he has this idea about expense reports, and he presents it at TechCrunch. And apparently people really liked it and said, hey, you should go with that. And so away he went, building what we would now know as Expensify. Let's follow the story. So this entrepreneur with a lot of experience working in software, like what he was doing at Red Swoosh, gets going on software here to make expense reports not suck. And one of the things that I hate, that I know you hate, is you have to go find your receipt, you got to take a picture of it, it's got to be perfect. Well, their software didn't particularly care if you scribbled your tip or wasn't perfectly clear. If it was clear enough to be interpreted, it was good enough for their software. And so there's a lot of things that came with Expensify that people like me really appreciate about it. Number one, easy pick. Integrates with the expense report software that companies I've worked for or companies that I've founded, and I use certain expense report software connected to a payroll and an HR system, kind of came along with their package, and I found out Expensify would integrate with it. Great, wonderful. Let's just make it work and make it easy for finance, make it easy for the employees. That was the vision that went here. So along they go with about $1 million in seed money in May of 2009, shortly after TechCrunch, which was 2008. So here you have Dave Barrett gets a group of folks and started building. And then in 2010, September of 2010, Redpoint, a highly well-known VC quality firm, they put about 5.7, or should I say they led the round that generated 5.7 in the Series A in September 2010. Well, they kept building and building and building on the software, making it even better, adding features that delighted you and me that were using it to make expense reporting even easier. And they raised $3.5 million from PJC in September of 2014 for a Series B. So, you know, I like to talk about it, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and then there's just another $3.5 million. So they're probably not giving up much of the company, or it was a down round. But either way, it's low numbers and probably low percentages of dilution going up, or low percentages if it happened to have been a down round. You know, we don't know, but we assume not. We go to 2015, OpenView comes along and they lead a $17 million Series C. Then they raised $11 million in debt from CIBC, that's the name of a bank, Canadian bank, in June of 2018. So you can really see something is happening here. And the venture stage was about $38 million, which is 27 or so in cash and 11 million in debt. I love it when companies are able to raise some debt. Now, hopefully there's not these onerous clauses with the bank for warrants and other things so that most of that debt becomes equity, that in fact it is debt that is manageable, and then you pay it off so that you can use the benefit of having that money to build and grow your company without diluting the equity that you and what you're giving to employees in the form of an ESOP or employee stock option plan. So I like the use of debt, and I happen to know CIBC. And if anybody needs debt, call Andrew Hack at CIBC, and he'll help you out. Maybe, as long as you have enough EBITDA and it's enough turns, and he likes it. Anyway, back to here. About that time, they have 447,000 paid members. Now, they like to talk about 10 million members. Well, that may be, there's different ways to count, and this is what we found in the draft S1 as they are going out preparing for an IPO. So what I want to do on this part of the story is, the product story is pretty simple. They were making Expensify for expense reports. They added to that the Expensify card in 2019, and 10% of the fee on that card goes to the expensify.org. What is expensify.org? Remember I told you that way back here, Dave was walking through the Tenderloin? Well, all throughout the course of his life, he's cared deeply about these charitable things, and now the card and expensify.org furthers all of that work that he's been doing. Because he's been building a company, but he didn't stop caring about the troubled people and the things that were going on in the Tenderloin. He's been doing things that he can, including the culture of his company being dedicated to helping those people. Now with the card and expensify.org, they sort of accelerate that, focusing on things like climate, justice, food, housing, reentry, which I believe is people coming out of prison trying to get back into society, and youth advocacy. The point is they've got a lot of things going on here that are trying to help people get a step up from where they are to hopefully a better place, and to get them a little momentum getting into society to be productive. And along the way, they need help in these areas. And then also climate, you know, they seem to feel strongly about climate change and a certain planet that needs help. So away they go with the Expensify card 19, which I think really drove something. So let's look at the numbers going into the IPO, and let's see if we can divine a valuation here. So it's 447,000 paying members at the end of Q2 18. That gets to 623, that's a nice jump, end of Q2 19, but then only up to 630 Q2 20 and 639 Q2 21. Well, it appears that this flattens off, but there's actually a little drama in there, is at some point this was up at 700,000 paying members. There were some price changes, some product issues that they went through, and suddenly they had a little dip. And the point is they're trying to build back on that as they move into the IPO. Well, gee, Tom, how are they running for an IPO if they, have some issues here trying to get the paid membership base? Well, let's take a look at that. Down here, I've got the financials as provided in the draft S1 that you can go take a look at sec.gov. 2019, $80 million in revenue, 60.2% gross margin, and a net income of $1.2 million. That's not too bad. And then adjusted EBITDA, in other words, take the net income, and there's a bunch of things that are going to subtract or add back in. Subtract from expenses, adds back into net income, and back into what would eventually become adjusted EBITDA. Well, 7.5 million adjusted EBITDA. The following year, 88 million, so only about a 10% growth in revenue going into 2020. A little bit of growth in margin there from 60.2 to 63.6 gross margin. But then they lost $1.7 million, which basically these 2 years are break even. But when they do the add backs and they're subtracting off expenses, doing the add backs that resulted in adjusted EBITDA, they end up with 26.7 in adjusted EBITDA. That's pretty darn good all of a sudden, especially when you're looking at 88 million here and it's 26 million here. Then 6 months, this is actual, 6-month actual 2021 as reported by the company, Ryan Schaefer, the CFO. Then doubling that, I do a full year estimate for 21. Let's look at what they reported as actuals first 6 months, Q1, Q2, ending June 30th. 65 million in revenue. Wow, 88 this year, 65 for only half a year. Margin goes up to 76.2%. Net income 14.6. Run the add backs and the things as they discuss, and it's 22.9 in adjusted EBITDA. On a full year estimate, that's $130 million. 29 million of net income and 45 million or so of EBITDA. This is a straight line estimate that doesn't account for two things: potential seasonality in the second half of the year. I didn't read anything about that in the S1 particularly. It didn't jump out to me at least. And Also, I'm just doing straight line. There may be a surge for the second half of the year as more people go to work following COVID, more expense reports are there. So we don't know. So this is just me doubling 6 months to do a straight line look for the year. So valuation, how do we figure it out? Well, I looked at a variety of companies in the fintech space, and this is fintech. And I looked at things like Affirm and tried to get multiples on EBITDA. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to put it out here. And if I'm wrong when this comes out, then everybody can just scream and holler and send a bunch of comments in and I'll answer as many as I can. But I think this is, when I back into it, about a $10 billion market cap because you're over $100 million in revenue. You're at a very, very significant EBITDA. And I found multiples and applied some stuff, and then I tapped down my analysis a little bit, and I got to about a $9 to $10 billion valuation. And I wrote SPAC here. The reason I wrote SPAC is because it's a draft S1. They haven't provided banking information. You know, there's no big banks announcing that, hey, we're the one taking them public and whatnot. And there's a couple people from Cowen, and Cowen is a very, very large clearinghouse and administrator and facilitator in the SPAC space. If you can get your hands on a Cowen report, it's about that thick, showing you the number of companies that are out there, blank check companies with money in the bank, investors there, the pipe set up that could go out and do this. And I went and looked at some of those and tried to estimate this. And there's a couple guys from Cowen that seem to think that Ryan Schaefer is verbally pointing toward a SPAC, even though there has been no official announcement from the company saying it's a SPAC. But people are looking at this and saying it's a SPAC. Time will tell, and when they update the S1 with the final information, we'll all know. But as for right now, I love the story of Expensify going from cause to delivering on cause, solving a simple problem. The lessons for you and me, whether you're running a t-shirt company in Berlin or trying to build a fintech company over a span of 10 years or more, is this. You know, simple problems that get great solutions sometimes are some of the most beloved companies you'll find on the planet. And if you take a look at Glassdoor, the rating for Expensify, I think it's like 4.5, 4.6 out of 5. So it's beloved by current and former employees that have taken the time to leave a review on Glassdoor. So simple problems that are solved in a really compelling way sometimes make companies that are beloved. Then personal interest. I don't think it's bad. And I think that entrepreneurs, you should be thinking about personal interest. Like, what will I do with my success today and along the way? You don't have to wait for an IPO to say, well, I'm going to go feed the children in Uganda or something. You can be doing things right now and you can weave it into the fabric of your company. 2 people or 200 people. Your personal interest, I think, should be part of benevolence coming from your company, even as you give a return for your investors and your venture capitalists that expect you to be building value. You can still do good along the way and weave it into the culture of your company. Last, focus and drive. The focus here is on expense reports, and then they added a card to it. It's very simple. The story, if you read it over 12, 13 years of Expensify, is very straightforward. From the problem they said they were solving to what they've delivered on at all points in between, they have stayed on track. They haven't bridged into 4 and 5 and 6 other related fintech areas that you'll see companies do. These are called pivots. There's no real pivots at Expensify, just a great company that solved the problem for you and me in a really compelling way. That's what I think about Expensify, but what do you think? Leave me a comment down below. I answer as many as I can, and while you're there, subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notifications of more great content for entrepreneurs, people starting a business, running a business, or part of a business just like you. If you like this case study, check out this one from the BizDoc archives on Affirm. I think you'll like it as well. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, the BizDoc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.